The call came at 3:30 in the morning. On the other end of the line, a trembling voice I hadn't heard in 2 years made my blood run cold. "Ryan, it's Sophia. She's in the hospital." My stepmother, Jennifer, was crying on the other end of the phone. Sophia, my 19-year-old sister, was in the intensive care unit of a Phoenix hospital with signs of severe poisoning. "The doctors say it was something she drank last night," Jennifer continued, her voice broken by sobs. "They found a toxic substance in her blood, Ryan. She almost. My name is Ryan, and at 32, I work as a corporate security consultant in Los Angeles. I have a small but comfortable apartment, an organized routine, and until that phone call, I believed I had left the ghosts of my family behind. But as Jennifer described Sophia's symptoms, seizures, intense vomiting, impending kidney failure, a specific memory hammered in my head like a fire alarm. 3 days earlier, on my 32nd birthday, I had received an unexpected package. There was no return address, just my address scrawled in handwriting I recognized immediately, the angular, slanted letters of my mother, Carol. Inside the box was an expensive bottle of artisanal Brazilian cachaça with a simple card, "To my son. Congratulations." I hadn't had a drop of alcohol in 5 years, since I moved to California and rebuilt my life away from family toxicity. The bottle sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days, staring at me like a ghost from the past. Then Jennifer called, saying Sophia was visiting Los Angeles for a job interview. She had stopped by my apartment on Friday to see me, something she hadn't done in months. I remember the moment perfectly. Sophia, with her blonde hair and genuine smile, picked up the bottle of cachaça and joked that she had finally discovered my secret stash of booze. "Can I take it? I'm having a small party with some friends tonight. I promise I'll share," she said, winking. I hesitated for a second. Something about the origin of that bottle bothered me, but Sophia was an adult responsible, and I didn't want to seem like the controlling older brother. "Sure, take it. Just, take it easy, okay?" Now, as Jennifer told me that the doctors suspected oleander or some similar plant toxin, my breathing began to falter. "Jennifer," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The cachaça that Sophia drank, was it from a bottle she took from my apartment?" "Yes, she mentioned that." "Why?" I closed my eyes and felt the world spin. The bottle wasn't a gift. It was a trap. And I, without knowing it, had put my sister directly in the line of fire. "I'm heading to Phoenix now," I said, already searching for my car keys. "And Jennifer, don't let anyone else in the family know you called me." "Not yet." As I drove through the early morning toward Arizona, a single question echoed in my mind. Why would my mother try to poison me on my own birthday? But the most disturbing thing was that, deep down, I wasn't surprised. Carol always had a peculiar way of showing love. And now, Sophia was paying the price for my naivety. If you're following this story and want to know how it all unfolded, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what I discovered about my mother completely changed my perception of our family. The dark road stretched out ahead of me, but my mind was already racing much faster than the car. Because if Carol had tried to kill me once, she would try again. And this time, I would be ready. 5 hours on the road gave me enough time to go over every detail of my childhood that I had tried to forget. Each rest stop was a new memory emerging like scars that hurt when it's about to rain. Carol was not a typical mother. At 41, she had built an impeccable reputation as a palliative care nurse in Tucson. Everyone saw her as a devoted woman who cared for the dying with motherly affection. What no one knew was how she treated her own children. My childhood was punctuated by strange accidents. Mysterious falls from my bike after Carol adjusted the brakes. Food poisoning that only affected me, never her. Once, when I was 12, I spent 3 days in the hospital after eating a sandwich she had prepared especially for me. "Children are so fragile," she would say to the doctors, in that sweet, concerned voice that would convince anyone. "Ryan has always been sensitive. I think he got my delicate digestive system." The doctors always believed her. An experienced nurse, a devoted single mother, struggling to raise a troubled child on her own. I was always the unlucky kid, never the victim of deliberate sabotage. The pattern intensified when Carol married David, Sophia's father. By the time I was 15, I had learned to test anything she offered me. Small bites first, wait 15 minutes, watch for any strange reactions. Carol interpreted my caution as teenage defiance. It was when Sophia was born that everything changed. Carol became the perfect mother, but only to her husband's daughter. With me, the lessons became more subtle and psychological. Comments about my appearance in front of family friends. Convenient forgetfulness about important school events. Small humiliations disguised as maternal care. Ryan has always been a difficult boy, she would say to Jennifer when David wasn't around. I think he resents the attention I give Sophia. Jealousy is such an ugly thing in teenagers. Jennifer, naive and trying to fit into her new husband's family, ended up buying into this narrative. David worked so much that he rarely witnessed the most toxic moments. And Sophia was too young to understand that her adoptive mother was systematically destroying my sense of security and belonging in the family. At 18, I moved away to college in Los Angeles and cut off contact almost completely. Carol interpreted this as Ryan finally maturing and going his own way. In reality, it was my first real attempt at self-preservation. David died of cancer when Sophia was 16. Carol took care of him until the end, the dedicated nurse once again earning the admiration of the entire community. At the funeral, she pulled me aside and whispered something that chilled my blood. It's funny how some people just can't heal, isn't it, Ryan? Even with all the medical care in the world. At the time, I interpreted it as grief talking. Now, driving through the desert toward the hospital where Sophia was fighting poisoning, those words echoed with a completely different meaning. I arrived at St. Joseph's Hospital in Phoenix as the sun was beginning to rise. Jennifer was in the waiting room, her eyes swollen and red, clutching a cup of cold coffee between her trembling hands. Ryan, thank God you made it, she said, standing up to hug me. The doctors, they said if she had drunk more, or if we had taken longer to bring her in. Jennifer, tell me exactly what happened last night, I said, guiding her back to her chair. From the moment Sophia left my apartment. Jennifer wiped her eyes with a soggy tissue. She was so excited. She said you'd finally relaxed a little, that you even had some good booze at home. She took the bottle to the apartment she was sharing with some friends near the university. My stomach clenched. Did she drink it alone? No, there were 3 other people there. But, Jennifer hesitated, Ryan, this is what's strange. Sophia was the only one who got sick. The others tried the cachaça, but she insisted on taking several shots in a row because she said it was special family stuff. The irony hit me like a punch. Sophia had poisoned herself because she wanted to honor a supposed family tradition. Carol had calculated the exact dose for my weight and metabolism, but Sophia was smaller, lighter, and had ingested much more than was necessary to be lethal. Were the doctors able to identify the substance? I asked, already fearing the answer. Something called oleander. A poisonous plant. They said it's common in Arizona, but rarely shows up in poisoning cases because it's very bitter. Except Sophia said the cachaça tasted sweet, almost masking any strange flavor. Oleander. Carol had used something familiar local, that would go unnoticed in a cursory investigation. And she had processed the toxin so that the taste was completely masked by the alcohol. My mother hadn't just tried to kill me. She had used her medical and pharmacological knowledge to create the perfect weapon, disguised as a sentimental birthday gift. Jennifer, I said, choosing my words carefully, I need to ask you a question, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did Carol know that Sophia was visiting Los Angeles? Jennifer frowned. Well, yes. She called asking if I thought you two were going to meet up. She said she hoped it would be an opportunity for you to reconnect after so long. The plan was even more diabolical than I had imagined. Carol knew about Sophia's visit. She knew I would probably give the bottle to someone else because I didn't drink anymore. And she knew that if anything happened to me or anyone close to me, she would be the first one at the hospital offering support and comfort. The devoted nurse. The loving mother. The woman who always showed up to take care of others in times of crisis. Ryan. Jennifer touched my arm. Are you okay? You look pale. I'm just processing everything, I replied. Jennifer, where is Carol now? At home, I think. She called me yesterday when she heard about Sophia. She said she'd come here as soon as she could get off work. Why? I looked out the waiting room window at the hospital parking lot. A silver Camry was parked in the 3rd row, with a gray-haired woman behind the wheel, talking on her phone. Carol had arrived. And she was watching me through the reception window. When our eyes met, she smiled. The same sweet, worried smile that had fooled doctors, neighbors, and family members for decades. But this time, I was no longer a helpless child. And she had just made a mistake that would prove fatal to her plans. Carol entered the waiting room like an actress stepping onto the stage. Her measured steps, her perfectly calibrated expression of maternal concern, the medical bag in her right hand, all the elements of her public persona carefully in place. "Jennifer, honey," she said, hugging my stepmother with just enough force to convey solidarity without seeming theatrical. "How's our girl?" Our eyes met over Jennifer's shoulder. Carol gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile, the kind of smile that could be interpreted as relief at seeing me there, but which I recognized as something completely different. "Ryan," she said, approaching me with open arms. "I'm so glad you came. Sophia will be so happy to know that you're both here to support her." The hug lasted 3 seconds longer than it should have. Long enough for her to whisper in my ear, "You've always been my smart son." I stepped back and studied her. Carol looked exactly as she always did, gray hair pulled back into a practical bun, her scrubs immaculate beneath her coat, that aura of professional competence she'd cultivated for decades. But there was something new in his eyes. A kind of amusement. "Did the doctor say anything new?" she asked Jennifer, already taking her stethoscope out of her bag. "Can I take a look at the chart? Sometimes a second medical opinion can help." Dr. Martinez, the doctor in charge of Sophia, appeared at the waiting room door at that moment. A man in his 50s, with a gray beard and that tired look in his eyes that comes from working too many long shifts. "Carson family," he said, consulting his clipboard. "That's us," Jennifer replied, standing up quickly. "How is she?" "Stable, but still critical. We were able to identify the toxin, oleander, as we suspected. The good news is that she has responded well to initial treatment. The bad news is that the amount ingested was significant." Carol approached. "Doctor, I'm Carol Dalton, Sophia's intensive care nurse. I'd like to know more about her condition." Dr. Martinez studied her for a moment. "Certainly. Oleander primarily affects the cardiovascular system. Sophia arrived with severe arrhythmia, unstable blood pressure, and signs of digitalis toxicity. We're monitoring her kidney and liver function as well." "And the toxin extraction?" Carol asked. In that professional voice I remembered her using on the phone with other doctors when I was a child. "Were you able to perform gastric lavage in time?" "Partially. Absorption had already begun when she arrived here, about 4 hours after ingestion." 4 hours. My mind processed that information. Sophia had left my apartment at 3 in the afternoon on Friday. If she had drunk the cachaça at 7 in the evening and arrived at the hospital at midnight. "Doctor," I said, interrupting the technical conversation between him and Carol, "is oleander commonly found in alcoholic beverages?" "Absolutely not," he replied immediately. "Oleander has an extremely bitter and toxic taste. To be present in a drink without being detected, it would have to be processed and masked in a very specific way. And the concentration we found, that was deliberate." Carol kept her expression perfectly neutral, but I saw his fingers tighten slightly around the handle of the medical bag. "Deliberate how?" Jennifer asked, her voice trembling. "As an intentional poisoning," Dr. Martinez said bluntly. "We've notified the authorities. The police will want to talk to all of you, especially about the origin of the drink." The silence that followed was broken by Carol. "How awful," she said, her voice heavy with indignation. "Who would do such a thing to such a sweet girl?" She looked directly at me when she said that. It was at that moment that everything crystallized in my mind. Carol hadn't just tried to kill me. She was here in the hospital, taking advantage of the situation to position herself as the dedicated nurse, the concerned mother, the medical professional offering support in a time of crisis. And if Sophia died, which was still a real possibility, Carol would be the first person Jennifer would turn to for emotional support. The nurse who understood loss, who had cared for David until the end. "Can I see Sophia?" Carol asked Dr. Martinez. "As a healthcare professional, is there anything I can do to help?" "For now, only immediate family," he replied. "But if there's a need for additional medical support." "Of course. Here's my card," Carol said, taking a business card out of her purse. Anything you need. Dr. Martinez took the card and left. Carol turned to Jennifer. Honey, you look exhausted. Why don't you go home and get some rest? Ryan and I can stay here and take care of everything. Jennifer hesitated. I don't want to leave her alone. She won't be alone, Carol said, gently touching Jennifer's arm. I'll be here. And so will Ryan. We're family. Family. The word echoed in my head like a fire alarm. Actually, I said, I think Jennifer should stay. And Carol, maybe you should go back to Tucson. Sophia has all the medical care she needs here. Carol turned to me, and for a split second, the mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes before the worried expression returned. Ryan, of course I'm staying. Sophia is my daughter too. Stepdaughter, I corrected. And only for a few years. Family is family, she replied, but there was a warning note in her voice. Just then, a uniformed police officer appeared in the doorway of the waiting room. Officer Rodriguez, according to the badge on his chest. He carried a notepad and had the posture of someone accustomed to asking difficult questions. Carson family? I need to talk to you about the incident involving Sophia Carson. Carol stepped forward. Of course, officer. We're all family here. How can I help you? Family. There was that word again. But while Carol spoke to the officer, using her most professional and helpful voice, my mind was working in a completely different direction. I pulled out my phone and discreetly took a picture of Carol talking to the officer. Then I opened the voice recording app. If Carol wanted to play the devoted family game, I would play along. But this time, I would document every move, every word, every inconsistency in her performance. Because the difference between a 12-year-old girl eating a poison sandwich and a 32-year-old man being handed a bottle of poison tequila was simple: experience. And now I had enough experience to not only recognize Carol's patterns, but to break them. While she explained to Officer Rodriguez how devastated she was by what had happened to our dear Sophia, I began typing a message to my lawyer in Los Angeles. The war that had begun on my birthday was far from over. But for the first time in years, I was no longer the helpless victim. I was the hunter. While Carol explained to Officer Rodriguez her motherly concern for Sophia, I kept the recorder on my phone discreetly running in my coat pocket. Every word she said was being documented, every voice modulation, every calculated pause. It's terrible to think that someone would do this to such a sweet little girl, Carol repeated, touching her chest dramatically. As a nurse, I see a lot of violence, but to poison an innocent young girl. Rodriguez wrote everything down, but I could tell he was completely buying her performance. Carol knew exactly how to present herself to authority figures: the experienced medical professional, the concerned mother, the woman who had dedicated her life to saving others. Mr. Dalton, Rodriguez turned to me, I understand that you were the one who provided the victim with the drink? Yes, I replied, choosing my words carefully. Sophia visited my apartment on Friday. There was a bottle of Cachaça that I had received as a birthday gift. Since I don't drink anymore, I offered to let her take it. And who gave you this gift? I felt Carol watching me intently. It arrived with no return address. Just my address and a simple birthday card. Carol interjected gently. Ryan was always very generous. It was typical of him to share anything good he received. The way she said it, as if she knew me intimately, as if we were a close, loving family, made me feel nauseous. Rodriguez continued asking routine questions about times and the location of the bottle. I answered everything honestly, but omitted my suspicions about Carol. Not yet. Not without solid evidence. After the cop left, Carol approached me in the waiting room. Jennifer had gone to buy coffee at the hospital cafeteria. Ryan, she said, her voice low and careful, I know these last few years have been complicated between us. But now, with Sophia like this, we need to pull together as a family. Of course, I replied, keeping my expression neutral. Sophia is the priority. Carol smiled, but there was something in her eyes that reminded me of when I was a kid and she was testing to see if I had eaten all the food she had prepared. I'm glad to hear that. You know, I've been thinking, maybe it's time for you to come home. To Arizona. It's time to put the past behind you and reconnect with your roots. Reconnect with my roots. As if my escape to California had been a rebellious teenage phase, not an act of self-preservation. I'll think about it, I lied. When Jennifer returned, Carol offered to go get medical updates on Sophia. The moment she left the waiting room, I pulled Jennifer aside. Jennifer, I need to ask you some questions about Carol, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Jennifer frowned. Ryan, what's going on? In the last few months, has Carol shown any particular interest in knowing about my life? Where I live, what I do, if I'm in a relationship? Well, Jennifer hesitated. She asks about you sometimes. She always says she misses you, that she hopes you two will reconcile someday. Why? What about my address specifically? She asked for your address a few weeks ago. She said she wanted to send you something for your birthday. I thought it was sweet, a gesture of peace. My stomach dropped. Jennifer, you gave her my address? Yes, of course. They're mother and son, Ryan. I thought. It's okay, I said quickly, seeing the confusion on her face. I just wanted to confirm. But it wasn't okay. Carol had planned this weeks in advance. She had gotten my address from Jennifer, prepared the poison, sent the bottle, and now she was here at the hospital playing the role of the concerned nurse. When Carol returned with an update on Sophia, stable but still critical, I excused myself to go to the bathroom. Instead, I went to a secluded corner of the hospital and called Dr. Martinez. Doctor, this is Ryan Dalton, Sophia's brother. I have a specific question about oleander. Is there any way to process the plant that completely masks the bitter taste? Yes, actually. If someone dries the leaves and makes a concentrated alcohol extract, then filters it several times, they can remove most of the bitterness. But that requires technical knowledge and access to specific equipment. What kind of knowledge? Basic pharmacology, organic chemistry, or medical experience with preparing tinctures and extracts. Why do you ask? Just curious about how someone managed to pull that off. I hung up and made the second call. To Gary Morrison, my private investigator friend in Los Angeles. Gary and I had known each other since college, and he now ran a small corporate investigation firm. Gary, I need a favor, urgently. I need information on someone. Carol Dalton, 41 years old, nurse in Tucson, Arizona. What kind of information? Professional and disciplinary history, anything that might indicate knowledge of toxicology or pharmacology. And Gary, total discretion. Got it. I'll send you what I can find in 24 hours. The third call was to my lawyer, Michael Chun, in Los Angeles. Michael, hypothetically, if someone tried to poison someone else and ended up poisoning a third party by mistake, what kind of criminal charges would be involved? Attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, possibly manslaughter if the victim died. Why do you ask, Ryan? Research for a project, I lied. One more thing. If I recorded conversations without consent in Arizona, would that be admissible in court? Arizona is a single-party consent state for recordings. That means only one person in the conversation needs to know they're being recorded. So yes, it would be admissible. Perfect. I returned to the waiting room with a plan beginning to form in my head. Carol was sitting next to Jennifer, talking quietly about how these things happen to families, and the importance of sticking together in difficult times. Carol, I said, sitting down in front of them, you're right about family. Actually, I've been thinking about taking you up on your invitation to move back to Arizona. Maybe it's time to reconnect with my roots. Carol's eyes lit up. Really? Ryan, that would be wonderful. Yes. Actually, I was thinking about looking for work in Tucson. Staying close to family. Especially now, with Sophia going through this. What a fantastic idea, Carol said, leaning forward. You know you always have a room at my house. It would be just like old times. Old times. When she tested poisons on me. I'd love to. Maybe we can talk about it when Sophia is feeling better. You could show me around town, where the best places to work are. Sure. We can have lunch, I can cook for you. Remember how you loved my special dishes? I remembered. I remembered every nausea, every hospital visit, every accident she called sensitive digestion. If you're following this twist and want to know how this family reunion ends, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happened when I accepted Carol's invitation changed everything. That would be perfect, I said, smiling at her. I can't wait. That night, at the hotel near the hospital, I organized everything I had collected into a spreadsheet on my laptop. Carol's schedules, behavior patterns, her reaction when she found out about Sophia, the specific questions she asked. Gary sent me the first report by email at 2 in the morning. Apparently, Carol had been disciplined twice in her career for inconsistencies in medication control. Nothing serious enough to result in dismissal, but suspicious enough to appear in her file. More interesting, she had taken continuing education courses in pharmacology and toxicology through continuing education programs for nurses. Officially, to better serve patients in palliative care. But now, those courses seemed to have a much more sinister purpose. On my phone, I set up an automatic recording app that would activate whenever Carol called. I also downloaded a backup app that would send all recordings to a secure server in real time. 3 in the morning, a new message from Gary, found something interesting. Carol was married before David. First husband died of food poisoning in 1998. Investigation was inconclusive. My blood ran cold. First husband poisoned. David died of cancer after years of Carol's dedicated care. And now she had tried to poison me. This wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. I called Michael Chen again. Michael, I need you to find me the best criminal lawyer in Arizona. Someone who specializes in poisoning cases. Ryan, are you in some kind of trouble? Not yet. But I will be. The next morning, I returned to the hospital with a professional digital recorder sewn into the lining of my coat. Every conversation with Carol from that point on would be documented. Sophia was doing better. She was still in the ICU, but the doctor said the worst was over. When she woke up briefly and saw me, she smiled weakly. Ryan, you came. Of course I did, little sister. You're going to be okay. Carol was on the other side of the bed, adjusting the monitors with the familiarity of decades of medical experience. Our girl is strong, she said, looking at me over Sophia's bed. She's going to make a full recovery. And when she does, we can focus on rebuilding our family. Rebuilding our family. As if it were possible to rebuild something that had been systematically destroyed by her. Yes, I said, discreetly turning on the recorder. I can't wait to spend more time together. The smile Carol gave me at that moment reminded me why I had run away to California when I was 18. But this time, I wasn't running away. This time, I was hunting. The next morning, I put my plan into action. Carol had agreed to meet me for lunch at Café Luna, a small, unassuming restaurant near the hospital where she often took coworkers. The perfect place for an intimate family conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table in the corner where I could see the entire entrance and have privacy for our conversation. The digital recorder was running in my coat's inside pocket, and my phone was set to automatically back up everything. Carol arrived punctually at noon, wearing her immaculate medical uniform and carrying that aura of professional competence she had cultivated over decades. She saw me, waved with a warm smile, and approached the table. Ryan dear, she said, kissing me on the cheek before sitting down. I'm so glad we finally have time to talk alone. Sophia was better this morning, thank God. Yes, it's a relief, I replied, watching as she methodically organized her purse and napkin. Always so controlled, so deliberate in every movement. Carol, I wanted to thank you for coming in so quickly when Jennifer called. Sophia really needs all her family together right now. Her eyes lit up. Of course, Ryan. Family is everything. Actually, I was thinking, after Sophia is fully recovered, how about you come spend a few days in Tucson? We can talk about your career options there. Maybe I can cook some of your favorite dishes from when you were a kid. His favorite dishes. As if I could forget every stomachache, every trip to the hospital, every accident that followed his special recipes. I'd love that, I lied, leaning forward with genuine interest. Actually, Carol, there's something I've been wanting to ask you for years. What is it, honey? About those sandwiches you used to make for me when I was a kid. The special ones, remember? You always said you had a secret ingredient that made them taste better. Carol hesitated for a split second. So brief that no normal person would have noticed. But I had spent years learning to read her micro-expressions. Oh yes, she said, laughing softly. It was just special seasonings, Ryan. You've always been so sensitive to different flavors. Funny you should mention that. Because I was telling Sophia about those sandwiches, and she said something interesting. She said the cachaça she drank had a strange, almost metallic taste, masked by the sweetness. Carol's smile faltered slightly. Ryan, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I just found the similarity curious. I paused, letting the silence linger. Especially considering that you were the one who taught me about medicinal plants when I was little. Remember? You always said that the difference between medicine and poison is just the dose. Carol sat up straighter in her chair. Ryan, you're sounding a little paranoid. The stress of the situation with Sophia. Carol, I said, keeping my voice low and controlled, I know. 2 words. That's all. But the effect was immediate. The mask slipped for a moment, and I saw something cold and calculated in his eyes before the expression of maternal confusion returned. You know what, honey? I know you processed oleander and mixed it into the tequila. I know you sent that bottle to me on my birthday hoping I'd drink it and die. I know you did the same thing to your first husband in 1998. And I know you probably hastened David's death too. The silence that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Carol studied me with the intensity of a predator assessing whether her prey poses a real threat. Those are very serious accusations, Ryan, she said finally, her voice losing all maternal warmth. And very dangerous to make without evidence. You're right. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. That's why I documented everything. I pressed play on a recording. Carol's voice echoed clearly. It's funny how some people just can't heal, isn't it, Ryan? Even with all the medical care in the world. His eyes widened slightly. That was at David's funeral. You were recording me at my husband's funeral. Not that day. But all of our conversations since yesterday? Yes. I paused the recording. Arizona is a one-state consent state, Carol. I can legally record our conversations. And I have hours of material. Carol leaned back, her mind working quickly. I could almost see the gears turning, calculating options, looking for ways out. Even if you have recordings, that doesn't prove anything about the tequila, she said, trying to sound confident. You have no way of connecting that to me. Actually, I do. I opened a photo on my phone and turned it so she could see it. It was a picture of the handwriting on the birthday card. Handwriting analysis confirms that it's your handwriting. And Jennifer admitted that she gave you my address weeks before my birthday. Carol's face hardened. Handwriting analysis isn't foolproof. You're right. But when combined with your medical history, 2 disciplinary infractions for inconsistencies in medication management, and your continuing education courses in toxicology, it starts to form an interesting pattern. For the first time since she had known me, Carol looked genuinely surprised. How did you? Private investigator. Former college classmate. Very efficient. I put the phone away. But you know what impresses me most, Carol? It's that you really thought you could show up at the hospital, play the concerned nurse, and no one would suspect a thing. Carol leaned forward, and for the first time, I saw the real woman behind the mask. There was no maternal warmth, no professional concern. Just cold calculation and controlled anger. What do you want, Ryan? I want you to confess. And if I don't? Then you explain to Detective Rodriguez why your fingerprints are on the bottle of tequila that nearly killed Sophia. It was a lie. There were no fingerprints on the bottle. I'd handled it too much. But Carol didn't know that. That's impossible, she said, but her voice faltered. Is it? Are you sure you wore gloves when you processed the oleander? When you filled the bottle? When you sealed the wax? There were a lot of steps, Carol. And you've always been so careful with your patients, but maybe a little careless when it came to other projects. I saw the exact moment when she realized she had lost. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies. Just a slight slump of her shoulders, like someone letting go of a weight they'd been carrying for a long time. You were always smarter than I gave you credit for, she said, almost admiringly. Even as a child, always questioning, always noticing details that others didn't see. I had a good teacher. You taught me that survival means paying attention to the signs. Carol laughed, a dry, humorless sound. And now? Are you going to turn me in to the police? Destroy your own mother. You destroyed our family decades ago. I'm just documenting the wreckage. She was silent for a long moment, staring out the cafe window at the movement on the street. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that they were witnessing the end of a 32-year war. Do you know what my biggest mistake was? She said finally. Underestimating me? No. Carol looked me in the eye, and for the first time, I saw something that could be interpreted as genuine pride. My biggest mistake was not finishing the job when you were 12 and in that hospital. I should have upped the dose in that sandwich. The blood drained from my veins. Not because of the threat, but because of the final confirmation, spoken in her own voice, recorded in high definition. Thanks for clearing that up, I said, discreetly pressing the stop button on the recorder. Carol noticed the movement and smiled, a smile that was anything but maternal. You think you've won, Ryan. But you don't understand what kind of war really started today. That's when my phone rang. Detective Rodriguez. Mr. Dalton? We need to talk. Urgent. We found something in Carol Dalton's hotel room that changes everything. Mr. Dalton, Detective Rodriguez said when I answered, we found a complete plant processing kit in Carol's hotel room. A press, filters, jars with oleander residue, and a notebook with detailed notes on dosages based on body weight. I looked across the coffee table at Carol. She had gone pale, but she still had that defiant look on her face. I need you to come down to the station right away, Rodriguez continued. With the recordings you mentioned, we have enough to get her arrested immediately. I'll be there in 15 minutes, I replied, hanging up the phone. Carol stood up from the table, trying to maintain her composure. Ryan, if you do this. What? Are you going to poison me again? I laughed bitterly. Carol, it's over. 32 years of psychological terror, and it's finally over. 2 hours later, Carol was being booked for attempted murder. The physical evidence from the hotel, combined with my recordings and Jennifer's statement confirming that she had asked for my address, made an airtight case. In court 3 months later, Carol tried to plead temporary insanity. But the prosecutor presented evidence of deliberate planning, the dosage notes, the specialized equipment, and the history of her first husband's death by poisoning. Sophia recovered completely. In fact, the incident brought us closer together than I ever thought possible. She began therapy to process the trauma, and together we uncovered patterns of manipulation that Carol had used against our family for years. You know what's crazy? Sophia said to me during one of our conversations in the hospital. I always felt like I had to compete for her attention. Now I realize that was intentional. She wanted us to fight, to not support each other. Jennifer also decided to go to therapy. She discovered signs she had ignored about David, small medical inconsistencies that now made terrible sense. During the trial, we learned that Carol had been fired from 2 hospitals for discrepancies in medication control, information she had managed to hide by moving out of state. Her first husband wasn't properly investigated because she was seen as the grieving nurse, not a suspect. Carol was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years. During the sentencing, she looked at me one last time. I saw no remorse or regret. I saw only cold anger at finally being found out. In the end, the experience taught me something fundamental about family and survival. For years, I carried guilt for cutting off contact with Carol, as if it were my obligation to maintain a relationship with someone who had tried to kill me repeatedly. I learned that self-preservation is not selfish. Trusting your instincts is not paranoia. And documenting patterns of abuse is not revenge, it's responsibility. Today, 2 years later, Sophia and I have the relationship we always should have had. Jennifer has found a new partner, a kind man who treats her with genuine respect. And me? I moved back to Los Angeles with a completely new understanding of what real family means. The last I heard, Carol was serving time in a state prison in Arizona. I heard that other inmates shunned her after they found out why she was there. Apparently, even criminals have moral standards about poisoning family. If this story of family manipulation and delayed justice touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I regularly share stories of people who found the strength to confront their own family predators. The biggest lesson I've learned? Some people use the title family as a shield for unacceptable behavior. True family doesn't try to destroy you, it builds you up. And when you finally understand the difference, you gain the power to choose who deserves a place in your life. In the end, the bottle of Cachaça Carol sent to kill me ended up saving my life in a way she never imagined. It gave me the courage to face the past and build a future free from its shadows. Carol tried to teach me that I was fragile, that I needed her to survive. Now I know the truth, I've always been strong enough. I just needed to stop letting her convince me otherwise.